picked the wrong music. There we go. Oh, man. Here we go. Crocodile is first today. And Annie's second. Look at this dubstep remix of Harry Potter. Harry Potter! Conk's Corner. Oh, man. I just made it. Oh, man. I hope Harry Potter punches somebody during the whole books. If at some point, instead of using a wand, he's like, BAM! Right in the face. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Ooh. On there. Wow. Hey, Juleskis. All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Conk's Corner with John Reedsley, a.k.a. me, John Voth, and Mark over there in the corner, and Dexter in the right corner. They're going to fight later. I am reading Harry Potter every day for an hour, just to connect with people, to have some fun, to distract ourselves from everything that's going on. I was thinking about drawing the Scar live. I'll do it tomorrow, actually. Honestly, I just made it. I went grocery shopping, and it took way longer than I expected. I just got in, rushed in, put on a cheesy shirt, took some headache pills, and here I am. I just made it in. Phew. So I think this is going to be a fun one. What are the things that I say usually? Okay, yeah, the first time I've read Harry Potter, I've seen the movies twice, but two of the movies when I was a teenager. Don't remember a lot from them. I read all the comments, so please, no spoilers, no hints about anything that's coming up. Leave a little Q&A at the end. And if you want to ask questions or say something that you want me to remember, use the cards at the bottom. You can actually do something, and I can look at these later on. So do that. I save these all on YouTube, so you can catch up there. I want to give a shout-out to all the nurses. I keep on saying nurses. I know you're a part of it, but the healthcare workers. So Alana Wright, Janelle, Carmen, and Kendall, they're usually in one room listening together. Lawrence Belmare, Darren Weeb, Katrina Joy, Sarah Popta, and Jess.xx. And if you're a healthcare worker listening in, let me know. I'll give you a shout out too. Thank you so much for what you're doing and allowing us to sit here and listen to Harry Potter. The Sari Botter.
The word laughing.
The barbecue. All right, so where were we last time? We left off, I know that Lupin taught the class about the ridiculous spell, how to take care of these, what are they called? The boggarts. So right now, Crookshanks went a bit crazy chasing Scabbers. Something happened there. I don't know. There's something afoot there. The whole family's turning in. Mary Kirby. Well, welcome, whole family. I hope your last name is Hole. No, because it's the whole family. All right, we're on this book here. We're going for page 111. I feel like I'm just frazzled. I'm just going for it today. It's gonna be an experience, ladies and gentlemen. Page 111. Here we go. Hey, he hasn't got a lot of attention today, so he's mumpy. Ron was still in a bad mood with Hermione next day. He barely talked to her all through herbology, even though he, Harry, and Hermione were working together on the same puffapod. That's a new thing. How's Scabbers? Hermione asked timidly, as they stripped fat pink pods from the plants and emptied the shining beans into a wooden pail. He's hiding at the bottom of my bed, shaking, said Ron angrily, missing the pail and scattering beans over the greenhouse floor. Professor Sprout, oh yeah. Careful, Weasley, careful, cried Professor Sprout as the beans burst into bloom before their very eyes. They had Transfiguration next. Harry, who had resolved to ask Professor McGonagall after the lesson whether he could go into Hogsmeade with the rest, joined the queue outside the classroom, trying to decide how he was going to argue his case. He was distracted, however, by a disturbance at the front of the line. Lavender Brown seemed to be crying. Parvati had her arm around her and was explaining something to Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas, who were looking very serious. "What's the matter, Lavender?" said Hermione anxiously, as she, Harry, and Ron went to join the group. Okay, somebody said to give her a Brummie accent. I looked at it very briefly today. Brummie is, I think so, that kind of accent. So I'm going to try something with Parvati. Let me know if it's working. She got a letter from home this morning, Parvati whispered. It's her rabbit, Binky. He's been killed by a fox. Oh, said Hermione. I'm sorry, Lavender. Oh, Lavender. How would you describe Lavender again? So sorry. Forgot how she was. Oh, she was like the Valley girl, I think. Yeah. I should have known, said Lavender tragically. You know what day it is? The 16th of October. That thing you're dreading. It will happen on the 16th of October. Remember? She was right. She was right. The whole class was gathered around Lavender now. Seamus shook his head seriously. Hermione hesitated. Then she said, You were dreading Binky being killed by a fox. Well, not necessarily by a fox, said Lavender, looking up at Hermione with streaming eyes. But I was obviously dreading him dying, wasn't I? Oh, said Hermione. She paused again. Then, was Binky an old rabbit? No, sobbed Lavender. He was only a baby. Parvati tightened her arm around Lavender's shoulders. But then, why would you dread him dying? Said Hermione. Parvati glared at her. Well, look at it logically, said Hermione, turning to the rest of the group. I mean, Binky didn't even die today, did he? Lavender just got the news today. Lavender wailed loudly. Ma! And she can't have been dreading it because it's come as a real shock. Don't mind Hermione, Lavender, said Ron loudly. She doesn't think other people's pets matter very much. Ooh, there's some sass from Ron. Professor McGonagall opened the classroom door at that moment, which was perhaps lucky. Hermione and Ron were looking daggers at each other, and when they got into class, they seated themselves either side of Harry and didn't talk to each other all lesson. Harry still hadn't decided what he was going to say to Professor McGonagall when the bell rang at the end of the lesson, but it was she who brought up the subject of Hogsmeade first. One moment, please, she called, as the class made to leave. As you're all in my house, you should hand Hogsmeade permission forms to me before Halloween. No form, no visiting the village, so don't forget. Neville put up his hand. Please, Professor, I think I've lost... Your grandmother sent yours to me directly, Longbottom. She just knew. The grandmother... This boy's a lost cause, said Professor McGonagall. She seemed to think it was safer. Well, that's all. You may leave. Ask her now, Ron hissed at Harry. Oh, but... Hermione began. Go for it, Harry, said Ron stubbornly. Harry waited for the rest of the class to disappear, then headed nervously for Professor McGonagall's desk. Yes, Potter? Harry took a deep breath. Professor, my aunt and uncle forgot to sign my form, he said. Professor McGonagall looked over her square spectacles at him. Like that. But didn't say anything. So, do you think it would be all right? I mean, will it be okay if I go to Hogsmeade? Professor McGonagall looked down and began shuffling papers on her desk. I'm afraid not, Potter, she said. You heard what I said. No form, no visiting the village. That's the rule. But, Professor, my aunt and uncle, they're muggles. They don't really understand about Hogwarts forms and stuff, Harry said, while Ron egged him on with vigorous nods. So dumb. Yeah, dude. Yeah. If you said I could go, but I don't say so, said Professor. But I don't say so, said Professor McGonagall, standing up and piling her papers neatly into a drawer. The form clearly states that the parent or guardian must give permission. She turned to look at him with an odd expression on her face. Was it pity? I'm sorry, Potter, but that's my final word. You had better hurry, or you'll be late for your next lesson. Oh, no. Please, no more vigorous nods. I'm scared. Oh, you told me not to do something? There was nothing to be done. Ron called Professor McGonagall a lot of names that greatly annoyed Hermione. Hermione assumed an all for the best expression that made Ron even angrier. And Harry had to endure everyone in the class talking loudly and happily about what they were going to do first once they got into Hogsmeade. "There's always the feast," said Ron, in an effort to cheer Harry up. "You know, the Halloween feast. In the evening?" "Yeah," said Harry gloomily. "Great." The Halloween feast was always good, but it would taste a lot better if he was coming to it after a day in Hogsmeade with everyone else. Nothing anyone said made him feel any better about being left behind. Dean Thomas, who was good with a quill, had offered to forge Uncle Vernon's signature on the form, but as Harry had already told Professor McGonagall he hadn't had it signed, that was no good. Ron half-heartedly suggested the invisibility cloak, but Hermione stamped on that one, reminding Ron what Dumbledore had told him about the Dementors being able to see through them. Percy had what were possibly the least helpful words of comfort. "They make us fuss about Hogsmeade, but I assure you, Harry, it's not all it's cracked up to be," he said seriously. "All right, the sweet shop's rather good, but Zonko's joke shop's frankly dangerous, and yes, the Shrieking Shack's always worth a visit, but really, Harry, apart from that, you're not missing anything." This guy has no social cues. On Halloween morning, Harry... Actually, let's throw a question your way. What's something that people think makes them look cool, but actually has the opposite effect? What's something that people do that they think makes, oh, this makes me look cool, but it actually has the very opposite effect? What are your thoughts on that? On Halloween morning, Harry awoke with the rest and went down to breakfast, feeling thoroughly depressed, though doing his best to act normally. "We'll bring you lots of sweets back from Honeydukes," said Hermione, looking desperately sorry for him. "Yeah, loads," said Ron. He and Hermione had finally forgotten their squabble about Crookshanks in the face of Harry's disappointment. "Don't worry about me," said Harry, in what he hoped was an offhand voice. "I'll see you at the feast. Have a good time." He accompanied them to the entrance hall, where Filch, the caretaker, was standing... Yes, Filch. Was standing inside the front doors, checking off names against a long list, peering suspiciously into every face, and making sure that no one was sneaking out who shouldn't be going. "Staying here, Potter?" shouted Malfoy, who was standing in line with Crabbe and Goyle. "Scared of passing the Dementors?" Harry ignored him, and made his solitary way up the marble staircase, through the deserted corridors, and back to Gryffindor Tower. He's just like alone in this dangerous place. There's all these monsters like, "We don't have the usual kids to kill. Where's the... Oh, there's one. Let's all gang up." "Password?" said the fat lady, jerking out of a doze. "Fortuna Major," said Harry listlessly. The portrait swung open and he climbed through the hole into the common room. It was full of chattering first and second years, and a few older students who had obviously visited Hogsmeade so often the novelty had worn off. "Oh, Colin Creevey, okay." Harry! Hi, Harry!" It was Colin Creevey, a second year who was deeply in awe of Harry, and never missed an opportunity to speak with him. "Are you going to Hogsmeade, Harry? Why not? Hey!" Colin looked eagerly around at his friends. "You can come and sit down with us if you like, Harry." No, thanks, Colin," said Harry, who wasn't in the mood to have a lot of people staring avidly at the scar on his forehead. I've got to go to the library. Got to get some work done." After that, he had no choice but to turn right around and head back out of the portrait hole once again. "What was the point of waking me up?" the fat lady called. "What was the point of waking me up?" the fat lady called grumpily after him as he walked by. Harry wandered dispiritedly towards the library, but halfway there he changed his mind. He didn't feel like working. He turned around and came face to face with Filch, who had obviously just seen off the last of the Hogsmeade's visitors. "What were you doing?" Filch snarled suspiciously. "Nothing," said Harry truthfully. "Nothing!" spat Filch, his jowls quivering. Oh, that's a... "Nothing!" spat Filch, his jowls quivering unpleasantly. "A likely story.
sneaking around on your own? Why aren't you in Hogsmeade buying stink pellets and belch powder and whizzing worms like the rest of your nasty little friends?
Harry shrugged.
Well, get back to your common room where you belong,
Snapped Filch, and he stood glaring until Harry had passed out of sight. But Harry didn't go back to the common room. He climbed a staircase, thinking vaguely of visiting the owlery to see Hedwig, and was walking along another corridor when I love messing up Hedwig and how pissed people get about it. And was walking along another corridor when a voice from inside one of the rooms said, "Harry? Oh, it's Lupin. Harry." Harry doubled back to see who had spoken and met Professor Lupin, looking around his office door. What are you doing?" said Lupin in a very different voice from Filch. "Where Ron? Where Ron and Hermione?" "Hogsmeade," said Harry in a would-be casual voice. "Ah," said Lupin. He considered Harry for a moment. "Why don't you come in? I've just taken delivery of a Grindylow for our next lesson." "A what?" said Harry. He followed Lupin into his office. In the corner stood a very large tank of water. A sickly green creature with sharp little horns had its face pressed against the glass, pulling faces and flexing its long, spindly fingers. Why are these? "Water demon," said Lupin, surveying the Grindylow thoughtfully. "We shouldn't have much difficulty with him, not after the Capet. The trick is to break his grip. You notice the abnormally long fingers? Strong, but very brittle." The Grindylow bared its green teeth and then buried itself in a tangle of weed in a corner. This little Grindylow, he's just like a little... he loves the sticky icky icky. "Cup of tea?" Lupin said, looking around for his kettle. "I was just thinking of making one." All right," said Harry awkwardly. Lupin tapped the kettle with his wand, and a blast of steam issued suddenly from the sprout. "Sit down," said Lupin, taking the lid off a dusty tin. "I've only got tea bags, I'm afraid, but I dare say you've had enough of tea leaves." Harry looked at him. Lupin's eyes were twinkling. How did you know about that?" Harry asked. "Professor McGonagall told me," said Lupin, passing Harry a chipped mug of tea. "You're not worried, are you?" "No," said Harry. He thought for a moment of telling Lupin about the dog he'd seen in Magnolia Crescent, but decided not to. He didn't want Lupin to think he was a coward, especially since Lupin already seemed to think he couldn't cope with a boggart. Something of Harry's thoughts seemed to have shown on his face, because Lupin said, "Anything worrying you, Harry?" No," Harry lied. He drank a bit of tea and watched the Grindylow brandishing a fist at him. "Yes," he said suddenly, putting his tea down on Lupin's desk. "You know that day we fought the boggart?" "Yes," said Lupin slowly. "Why didn't you let me fight it?" said Harry abruptly. Lupin raised his eyebrows. "I would have thought that was obvious, Harry," he said, sounding surprised. Harry, who had expected Lupin to deny that he'd done anything such thing, was taken aback. "Why?" he said again. "Well," said Lupin, frowning slightly, "I assumed that if the boggart faced you, it would assume the shape of Lord Voldemort." Harry stared. Not only was this the last answer he'd expected, but Lupin had said Voldemort's name. The only person Harry had ever heard say the name aloud, apart from himself, was Professor Dumbledore. "Clearly, I was wrong," said Lupin, still frowning at Harry. "But I don't think it's a good idea for Lord Voldemort to materialize in the staff room. I imagine that people would panic." "I did think of Voldemort first," said Harry honestly. "But then I remembered those Dementors." "I see," said Lupin thoughtfully. Well, I'm impressed." He smiled slightly at the look of surprise on Harry's face. "That suggests that what you fear most of all is fear. Very wise, Harry." Harry didn't know what to say to that, so he drank some more tea. "So, you've been thinking that I didn't believe you capable of fighting the boggart?" said Lupin shrewdly. "Well, yeah," said Harry. He was suddenly feeling a lot happier. "Professor Lupin, you know the Dementors." He was interrupted by a knock on the door. "Come in," called Lupin. The door opened, and in came Snape. He was carrying a goblet, which was smoking faintly, and stopped at the sight of Harry, his black eyes narrowing. Snape's just like walking. Yeah, all the kids are gone. It's like, it's time for my drink. That's his go-to drink. Just something that's steaming and poisonous. "Ah, yes, let me replenish the evil inside of me."
Oh, Papa.
Oh, Papa. "Ah, Severus," said Lupin, smiling. "Thanks very much. Could you leave it here on the desk for me?" Snape set the smoking goblet down, his eyes wandering between Harry and Lupin. I was just showing Harry my Grindylow," said Lupin pleasantly, pointing at the tape. "Fascinating," said Snape, without looking at it. "You should drink that directly, Lupin." Yes, I will," said Lupin. "I made an entire cauldron full," Snape continued, "if you need more." "I should probably take some again tomorrow. Thanks very much, Severus." "Not at all," said Snape, but there was a look in his eyes Harry didn't like. He backed out of the room, unsmiling and watchful. He's drifting backwards. "See you later, Harry." Professor Snape has very kindly concocted a potion for me," he said. "I have never been much of a potion brewer, and this one is particularly complex." He picked up a goblet and sniffed it. "Pity sugar makes it useless," he added, taking a sip and shuddering. "Why?" Harry began. Lupin looked at him and answered an unfinished question. "I've been feeling a bit off color," he said. "This potion is the only thing that helps. I'm very lucky to be working alongside Professor Snoop. There aren't many wizards who are up to making it." Shape is always in slow motion for some reason. Professor Lupin took another sip, and Harry had a mad urge to knock the goblet out of his hands. "Professor Snape's very interested in the dark arts," he blurted out. "Really?" said Lupin, looking only mildly interested, as he took another gulp of potion. "Some people reckon," Harry hesitated, then plunged recklessly on. "Some people reckon he'd do anything to get the defense against the dark arts job." Lupin drained the goblet and pulled a face. "Disgusting," he said. "Well, Harry, I'd better get back to work. I'll see you at the feast later." "Right," said Harry, putting his empty teacup down. The empty goblet was still smoking. "There you go," said Ron. We got as much as we could carry." A shower of brilliantly colored sweets fell into Harry's lap. It was dusk, and Ron and Hermione had just turned up in the common room, pink-faced from the cold wind, and looking as though they'd had the time of their lives. It's only a day trip. For some reason, I thought it was like a week-long thing where they're all gone for a week, and Harry doesn't get to go on this excursion. Okay. Oh. Well, it's not that bad. I mean, yeah, it sucks, but it's not that bad, Harry. Stop being a little baby. Slither and Snoop floating in and out of my... Yeah, they should have put that into the movies. Him just floating around everywhere. It's like one of the... You know those Russian dances? Have you seen those? Where there's these... all the women, they have these long dresses and they're taking very, very small steps. And it looks like they're floating. It's pretty amazing. That's how I reckon he's floating around. So they just plopped their sweets in his lap. "Thanks," said Harry, picking a packet of tiny black pepper imps. What's Hogsmeade like? Where did you go?" By the sound of it, everywhere. Dervish and Bangas, the wizarding equipment shop, Zonko's joke shop, into the three broomsticks for foaming mugs of hot butterbeer, and many places besides. Who's saying this? "The post office, Harry. About 200 owls, all sitting on shelves, all color-coded depending on how fast you want your letter to get there. Honeydukes has got a new kind of fudge. They were giving out free samples. There's a bit. Look, We think we saw an ogre, honestly. They get all sorts at the Three Broomsticks. Wish we could have brought you some butterbeer. Really warms you up. What did you do? Said Hermione, looking anxious. Did you get any work done? No, said Harry. Lupin made me a cup of tea in his office, and then Snape came in. He told them all about the goblet. Ron's mouth fell open. Lupin drank it, he gasped. Is he mad? Oh, I would totally have hardcore Hogsmeade FOMO, but also, all of you would tell me you're a baby, suck it up. So right back at you. Hermione checked her watch. We'd better get down, you know. The feast will be starting in 5 minutes. They hurried through the portrait hole and into the crowd, still discussing Snape. But if he, you know, Hermione dropped her voice, glancing nervously around. If he was trying to poison Lupin, he wouldn't have done it in front of Harry. Yeah, maybe, said Harry, as they reached the entrance hall and crossed into the great hall. It had been decorated with hundreds and hundreds of candle-filled pumpkins, a cloud of fluttering live bats, and many flaming orange streamers, which were streaming lazily across the stormy ceiling like brilliant water snakes. The food was delicious. Even Hermione and Ron, who were full to bursting with honeydew sweets, managed second helpings of everything. Harry kept glancing at the staff table. Professor Lupin looked cheerful, and as well as he ever did. He was talking animatedly to tiny little Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher. Harry moved his eyes along the table, to the place where Snape sat. Was he imagining it, or were Snape's eyes flickering towards Lupin more often than was natural? The feast finished with an entertainment provided by the Hogwarts ghosts. They popped out of the walls and tables to do a spot of formation gliding. Oh my gosh. They're like those jets and they do formation flying. Oh, that's ridiculous. Come on. How would you not be like, I mean, I guess it's a sort of dance, but it's, come on. Nearly headless Nick, the Gryffindor ghost, had a great success with a reenactment of his own botched banding. And then they cut me right here. It had been such a good evening that Harry's good mood couldn't even be spoiled by Malfoy, who shouted through the crowd as they all left the hall, "The Dementors and the love, Potter!" Harry, Ron, and Hermione followed the rest of the Gryffindors along the usual path to Gryffindor Tower. But when they reached the corridor, which ended with a portrait of a fat lady, they found it jammed with students. "Why isn't anyone going in?" said Ron curiously. Harry peered over the heads in front of him. The portrait seemed to be closed. "Let me through, please," came Percy's voice, and he came bustling importantly through the crowd. "What's the hold-up here? You can't have all forgotten the password. Excuse me, I'm head boy." And then a silence fell over the crowd, from the front first, so that a chill seemed to spread down the corridor. They heard Percy say in a suddenly sharp voice, Somebody get Professor Dumbledore, quick!" People's heads turned. Those at the back were standing on tiptoe. "What's going on?" said Ginny, who had just arrived. Next morning, Professor Dumbledore was there, sweeping towards the portrait. Next moment, not next morning, the Gryffindors squeezed together to let him through, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione moved closer to see what the trouble was. "Oh my!" Hermione exclaimed and grabbed Harry's arm. The fat lady had vanished from her portrait, which had been slashed so viciously that strips of canvas littered the floor. Great chunks of it had been torn away completely. Dumbledore took one quick look at the ruined painting and turned, his eyes somber, to see Professor McGonagall, Lupin, and Snape hurrying towards him. "We don't need to find her," said Dumbledore. "Professor McGonagall, please go to Mr. Filch at once and tell him to search every painting in the castle for the fat lady." "Oh,
You'll be lucky,"
said a crackling voice. It was Peeves, the poltergeist, bobbing over the crowd and looking delighted, as he always did at the sight of wreckage or worry. "What do you mean, Peeves?" said Dumbledore calmly, and Peeves' grin faded a little. He didn't dare taunt Dumbledore. Instead, he adopted an oily voice that was no better than his cackle.
Got your cock. Okay, there we go. Ashamed, your headship, sir. Doesn't want to be seen. She's a horrible mess. Saw her running around the landscape up on the 4th floor, sir. Dodging between the trees. Crying something dreadful.
That's his laugh. He said happily.
Poor thing.
He said unconvincingly.
Did she say who did it?
Said Dumbledore quietly.
Oh, yes, Professor Head,
Said Peeves with an air of one cradling a large bombshell in his arms.
He got very angry, and she wouldn't let him in, you see.
Peeves flipped over and grinned at Dumbledore from between his own legs.
Nasty temper he's got, that Sirius Black.
That's the end of that chapter.
Sirius Black?
Huh? Yeah, what was the end of there? I kind of... Oh, he's saying that Sirius Black popped in. I just skimmed over that. Oh, okay. He's in the building? Okay, come on. Already? There's a serial killer on the loose. Last book was a whodunit. This one's starting to be like a thriller, murderer chasing them, like a thriller. It's probably going to turn into them constantly escaping a murderer who's on their tails. Chapter 9, Grim Defeat. Actually, here's a question. I'm just going to make it up right now. What is a thing that you constantly got, sad or sad about, or something that saddened you as a kid, looking back where you're like, that was a really stupid thing to get sad about. It was really dumb. A head on it. Chapter 9, Grim Defeat. Professor Dumbledore sent all the Gryffindors back to the Great Hall, where they were joined 10 minutes later by the students from Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin, who all looked extremely confused.
The teachers and I need to conduct a thorough search of the castle,
Professor Dumbledore told them, as Professor McGonagall and Flitwick closed all doors into the hall.
I'm afraid that, for your own safety, you will have to spend the night here. I want the prefects to stand guard over the entrances to the hall, and I am leaving the head boy and girl in charge. Any disturbances should be reported to me immediately,
he said to Percy, who was looking immensely proud and important.
Send word with one of the ghosts.
Professor Dumbledore paused, about to leave the hall, and then said,
Oh, yes. You will be needing...
One casual wave of his wand, and the long tables flew to the edges of the hall and stood themselves against the walls. He's such a badass. He's just like,
Oh, yes.
just
I don't really need to exert any effort for this.
so badass. One casual wave of his wand, and the long tables flew to the edges of the hall and stood themselves against the walls. Another wave, and the floor was covered with hundreds of squashy purple sleeping bags.
Sleep well,
said Professor Dumbledore, closing the door behind him. Nothing crazy happened there, but he's a badass. He just is. He's just like,
Yeah, go ahead. Sleep well. Bye.
The hall immediately began to buzz excitedly. The Gryffindors were telling the rest of the school what had just happened. Everyone into their sleeping bags, shouted Percy. Come on now, no more talking. Lights out in 10 minutes. Come on. Oh, come on, Ron said to Harry and Hermione. They seized 3 sleeping bags and dragged them into a corner. Do you think Black's still in the castle? Hermione whispered anxiously. Dumbledore obviously thinks he might be, said Ron. It's very lucky he picked tonight, said Hermione, as they climbed fully dressed into their sleeping bags and popped themselves on their elbows to talk. The one night we weren't in the tower. I reckon he's lost track of time, being on the run, said Ron. Didn't realize it was Halloween. Otherwise, he'd have come bursting in here. Hermione shuddered. Okay, I know that there's a Harry Potter Halloween mix or something like that. You know what? I'll leave it be for now. I'll come back to it later. All around them, people were asking each other the same question. How did he get in? Maybe he knows how to apparate, said a Ravenclaw a few feet away. Just appear out of thin air, Hufflepuff. Disguised himself, probably, said a Hufflepuff fifth year. Dean Thomas. He could have flown in, suggested Dean Thomas. Honestly, am I the only person who's ever bothered to read Hogwarts history? Said Hermione crossly to Harry and Ron. Probably, said Ron. Why? Because the castle's protected by more than walls, you know, said Hermione. There are all sorts of enchantments on it to stop people entering by stealth. You can't just apparate in here, and I'd like to see the disguise that could fool those Dementors. They're guarding every single entrance to the grounds. They'd have seen him fly in too, and Filch knows all the secret passages. They'll have them all covered. The lights are going out now, Percy shouted. I want everyone in their sleeping bags and no more talking. The candles all went out at once. The only light now came from the silvery ghosts who were drifting about talking seriously to the prefects, and the enchanted ceiling which, like the sky outside, was scattered with stars. What with that and the whispering that still filled the hall, Harry felt as though he was sleeping out of doors in a light wind. Once every hour, a teacher would reappear in the hall to check that everything was quiet. Around 3 a.m, I'm just remembering that Lupin swallowed some of that whatever was in the goblet. So this happening, and I guess whatever's going to happen to Lupin at the same time. It'll be interesting. Around 3 a.m, when many students had finally fallen asleep, Professor Dumbledore came in. Harry watched him looking around for Percy, who had been prowling between the sleeping bags, telling people off for talking. Percy was only a short way away from Harry, Ron, and Hermione, who quickly pretended to be asleep as Dumbledore's footsteps drew near. Any sign of him, Professor? Asked Percy in a whisper.
No. All well here?
Everything under control, sir.
Good. There's no point moving them all now. I found a temporary guardian for the Gryffindor Portrait Hall. You'll be able to move them back in tomorrow.
And the fat lady, sir?
Hiding in a map of Argyllshire on the 2nd floor. Apparently, she refused to let Black in without the password, so he attacked. She's still very distressed, but once she's calmed down, I'll have Mr. Filch restore her.
Harry heard the door of the hall creak open again, and more footsteps.
Headmaster.
It was Snape. Harry kept quite still, listening hard.
The whole of the 3rd floor has been searched. He's not there. And Filch has done the dungeons. Nothing there either. What about the astronomy tower? Professor Trelawney's room, the owlery? All searched. Very well, Severus. I didn't really expect Black to linger. Have you any theory as to how he got in, Professor?
Said Snape. Harry raised his head very slightly off his arms to free his other ear.
Many, Severus. Each of them as unlikely as the next.
Harry opened his eyes as a fraction and squinted up to where they stood. Dumbledore's back was to him, but he could see Percy's face, rapt with attention, and Snape's profile, which looked angry. You remember the conversation we had, Headmaster, just before the start of term? Said Snape, who was barely opening his lips, as though trying to block Percy out of the conversation. I do, Severus, said Dumbledore, and there was something like a warning in his voice. It seems almost impossible that Black could have entered the school without inside help. I did express my concerns when you appointed. I do not believe a single person inside this castle would have helped Black enter it, said Dumbledore, and his tone made it so clear that the subject was closed that Snape didn't reply. I must go down to the Dementors, said Dumbledore. I said I would inform them when our search was complete. Didn't they want to help, sir? Said Percy. Oh, yes, said Dumbledore coldly. But I'm afraid no Dementor will cross the threshold of this castle while I am headmaster. Percy looked slightly abashed. Dumbledore left the hall, walking quickly and quietly. Snape stood for a moment, watching the headmaster with an expression of deep resentment on his face. Then he, too, left. Harry glanced sideways at Ron and Hermione. Both of them had their eyes open too, reflecting the starry ceiling. What was that all about? Ron mouthed. Oh, wow. So Snape obviously suspects Lupin of working with Black. They've had this conversation before. For some reason, Snape doesn't like Lupin before this whole thing with the ridiculous spell. So Snape doesn't like anybody except for Slytherins and evil little kids. What happened to him? Who hurt you, Snape? Who hurt you? The school talked of nothing but Sirius Black for the next few days. The theories about how he had entered the castle became wilder and wilder. Hannah Abbott from Hufflepuff spent much of the next herbology class telling anyone who'd listen that Black could turn into a flowering shrub. The fat lady's ripped canvas had been taken off the wall and replaced with the portrait of Sir Cadogan. Yes, 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 and his fat grey pony. I hope he comes back. I love that dude. Love that dude so much. Stupid little knight. Oh, so funny. Nobody was very happy about this. Sir Cadogan spent half of his time challenging people to duels. Yes, he did. Yes, he does that. Ah, so happy. And the rest thinking up ridiculously complicated passwords, which he changed at least twice a day. He's barking mad, said Seamus Finnegan angrily to Percy. Can't we get anyone else? None of those other pictures wanted the job, said Percy, frightened of what happened to the fat lady. Sir Cadogan was the only one brave enough to volunteer. Sir Cadogan, however, was the least of Harry's worries. He was now being closely watched. Hannah? Happy birthday, Hannah! Which Hannah? Which Hannah? Which Hannah is this?
It's Julia Rosek's sister.
Happy birthday, Hannah! Happy birthday to you! Happy birthday, Hannah! Oh. You're welcome. Sir Cadogan, however, was the least of Harry's worries. He was now being closely watched. Teachers found excuses to walk along corridors with him and Percy Weasley, acting, Harry suspected, on his mother's orders. Was tailing him everywhere, like an extremely pompous guard dog. To cap it all, Professor McGonagall summoned Harry into her office, with such a somber expression on her face. Harry thought someone must have died. There's no point hiding it from you any longer, Potter, she said in a very serious voice. Okay, I'll try that again. There's no point hiding it from you any longer, Potter, she said in a very serious voice. I know this will come as a shock to you. But Sirius Black... I know he's after me, said Harry wearily. I heard Ron's dad telling his mum. Mr. Weasley works for the Ministry of Magic. Professor McGonagall seemed very taken aback. She stared at Harry for a moment or two, then said, I see. Well, in that case, Potter, you'll understand why I don't think it's a good idea for you to be practicing Quidditch in the evenings. Out on the pitch with only your teammates. It's very exposed, Potter. We've got our first match on Saturday, said Harry, outraged. I've got to train, Professor. Professor McGonagall considered him intently. Harry knew she was deeply interested in the Gryffindor's team's prospects. It had been she, after all, who'd suggested him as a seeker in the first place. He waited, holding his breath. Professor McGonagall stood up and stared out the window at the Quidditch pitch, just visible through the rain. Well, good connection. Am I still running? It just said pause to the connection. I'd like to see us win the cup at least. But all the same, Potter, I'd be happier if a teacher were present. I'll ask Madam Hooch to oversee your training sessions. Do it. Sing it. Sing what?
You're simply the best.
I have to sing that?
I don't know why.
I don't why. I'll sing it. You're simply the best. Oh, better than all the rest. Better than anyone. You want me to sing something? I'll sing it. The weather worsened steadily as the first Quidditch match drew nearer. Undaunted, the Gryffindor team were training harder than ever under the eye of Madam Hooch. Then, at their final training session before Saturday's match, Oliver Wood gave his team some unwelcome news. We're not playing Slytherin, he told them, looking very angry. Flint's just been to see me. We're playing Hufflepuff instead. Why? Why? Chorused the rest of the team. Flint's excuse is that their seeker's arm's still injured, said Wood, grinding his teeth furiously. But it was obvious why they're doing it. Don't want to play in this weather. Think it'll damage their chances. There had been strong winds and heavy rain all day, and as Wood spoke, they heard a distant rumble of thunder. "There's nothing wrong with Malfoy's arm," said Harry furiously. "He's faking it." "I know that, but we can't prove it," said Wood bitterly. "And we've been practicing all those moves, assuming we're playing Slytherin, and instead it's Hufflepuff, and their style is quite different. They've got a new captain and seeker, Cedric Diggory." Angelina, Alicia, and Katie suddenly giggled. "What?" said Wood, frowning at this light-hearted behaviour. "He's that tall, good-looking one, isn't he?" said Angelina. I can't remember any of these people. "Strong and silent," said Katie, and they started to giggle again. "He's only silent because he's too thick to string two words together," said Fred impatiently. "Oh, Fred is jealous. Fred is jealous. I don't know why you're worried, Oliver. Hufflepuff are a pushover. Last time we played them, Harry caught the snitch in about 5 minutes. Remember?" "We were playing in completely different conditions," Wood shouted, his eyes bulging slightly. "Diggory's put a very strong side together. He's an excellent seeker. I was afraid you'd take it like this. You'd take it like this. We mustn't relax. We must keep our focus. Slytherins are trying to wrongfoot us. We must win." "Oliver, calm down," said Fred, looking slightly alarmed. We're taking Hufflepuff very seriously." "Seriously?" Also, I'd like to hear some tactical analysis of Hogwarts Quidditch games somewhere on the internet. Yeah, you go nerd out, Nathan. The day before the match, the winds reached howling point. Winds reached howling point, and the rain fell harder than ever. It was so dark inside the corridors and classrooms that extra torches and lanterns were lit. The Slytherin team were looking very smug indeed, and none more so than Malfoy. If only my arm was feeling a bit better," he sighed, as the gale outside pounded the windows. Harry had no room in his head to worry. Oh, you know what? I got the perfect kind of mood for this. Oh, yeah. I'm just going to find it real quick. There was something that really worked. Rainy Night at Hogwarts. There we go. Hear that rain? Yeah, that works. Where are we? There we go. Harry had no room to worry about anything except the match next day. Oliver Wood kept hurrying up to him in between classes and giving him tips. The third time this happened, Wood talked for so long that Harry suddenly realized he was 10 minutes late for defense against the dark arts, and set off at a run with Wood shouting after him, "Diggory's got a very fast swerve, Harry, so you might want to try looping him." Harry skidded to a halt outside the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, pulled the door open, and dashed inside. "Sorry I'm late, Professor Lupin, But it wasn't Professor Lupin who looked up at him from the teacher's desk. It was Snape. "Oh, damn! The lesson began 10 minutes ago, Potter, so I think we'll make it 10 points from Gryffindor. Sit down." But Harry didn't move. "Where's Professor Lupin?" he said. "He says he's feeling too ill to teach today," said Snape with a twisted smile. "I believe I told you to sit down." But Harry stayed where he was. "What's wrong with him?" Snape's black eyes glittered. "Nothing life-threatening," he said, looking as though he wished it was. 5 more points from Gryffindor. And if I have to ask you to sit down again, it will be 50. Harry walked slowly to his seat and sat down. Snape looked around the class. "As I was saying before Potter interrupted, Professor Lupin has not left any record of the topics you have covered so far." "Please, sir, we've done Boggarts, Red Caps, Kappas, and Grindylows," said Hermione quickly. "And we're just about to start—"
"Be quiet," said Snape coldly. "I did not ask for information. I was merely commenting on Professor Lupin's lack of organization."
He's the best defense against the dark arts teacher we've ever had, said Dean Thomas boldly, and there was a murmur of agreement from the rest of the class. Snape looked more menacing than ever. You were easily satisfied. Lupin is hardly overtaxing you. I would expect first years to be able to deal with redcaps and grindylows. Today we shall discuss... Harry watched him flick through the textbook to the very back chapter, which he must know they hadn't covered. Werewolves, said Snape. But, sir, said Hermione, seeming unable to restrain herself, we're not supposed to do werewolves yet. We're due to start Hinky-Punks. Hinky-Punks? Miss Granger, said Snape in a voice of deadly calm, I was under the impression that I was taking this lesson, not you. And I'm telling you all to turn the page 394. He glanced around again. All of you. Now. With many bitter sidelong looks and some sullen muttering, the class opened their books. Which one of you can tell me how we distinguish between the werewolf and the true wolf? Said Snape. Everyone sat in motionless silence. Everyone except Hermione, whose hand, as it often did, had shot straight into the air. Anyone, Snape said, ignoring Hermione. Hey, buddy, come back into frame. There you are. There he is. His twisted smile was back. Are you telling me that Professor Lupin hasn't even taught you the basic distinction between... We told you, said Parvati suddenly. We haven't got as far as werewolves yet. We're still on... Silence! Snarled Snape. Well. I never thought I'd meet a third-year class who wouldn't even recognize a werewolf when they saw one. I shall make a point of informing Professor Dumbledore how very behind you all are. Please, sir, said Hermione, whose hand was still in the air. The werewolf differs from the true wolf in several small ways. The snout of the werewolf... That is the second time you have spoken out of turn, Miss Granger, said Snape coolly. 5 more points from Gryffindor for being an insufferable know-it-all. He's been such a jerk. Such a jerk. I'm actually on page 129. Or unless you're talking about something else. Hermione went very red, put down her hand and stared at the floor with her eyes full of tears. Oh! Hermione! It was a mark of how much the class loathed Snape that they were all glaring at him, because every one of them had called Hermione a know-it-all at least once, and Ron, who told Hermione she was a know-it-all at least twice a week, said loudly, You asked us a question and she knows the answer. Why ask if you don't want to be told? Whoa! Ron being bold and defending Hermione. The class knew instantly he'd gone too far. Snape advanced on Ron slowly, and the room held its breath. Detention, Weasley, Snape said silkily, his face very close to Ron's. And if I ever hear you criticize the way I teach a class again, you will be very sorry indeed. No one made a sound throughout the rest of the lesson. They sat and made notes on werewolves from the textbook, while Snape prowled up and down the rows of desks, examining the work they had been doing with Professor Lupin. Very poorly explained. That is incorrect. The kappa is more commonly found in Mongolia. Professor Lupin gave this 8 out of 10. I would have given it a 3. When the bell rang at last, Snape held them back. You will each write an essay to be handed in to me on the ways you recognize and kill werewolves. I want 2 rolls of parchment on the subject, and I want them by Monday morning. It is time somebody took this class in hand. Weasley, stay behind. We need to arrange your detention. Wow. Wow. Harry and Hermione left the room with the rest of the class, who waited until they were well out of earshot, then burst into a furious tirade about Snape. Snape's never been like this with any of our defense against the dark arts teachers. Even if he did want the job, Harry said to Hermione. Why has he got it in for Lupin? Do you think this is all because of the boggart? I don't know, said Hermione pensively, but I really hope Professor Lupin gets better soon. Ron caught up with them 5 minutes later in a towering rage. Do you all know that? He called Snape something that made Hermione said, "Run! It's making me do. I've got to scrub out the bedpans in the hospital wing without magic." He was breathing deeply, his fists clenched. "Why couldn't Black have hidden in Snape's office, eh? You could have finished him off for us." Yeah, I'd feel pretty angry too if you gave me that. Okay, I got about a minute or two left. Harry woke extremely early the next morning, so early that it was still dark. Actually, you know what? It's going to suck to start this all and have to end in the middle of the next page when things are happening. So, I'm sorry, I'm going to leave a bit early today. Okay? I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry for giving you an hour and a half so often. I'm so sorry. All right. Yeah, this is turned out to be interesting. Lupin's sick. I bet this is a red herring. It doesn't have anything to do with Snape putting something into the drinks. I don't think so. Questions. Let's see down here. What are the questions? Sing simply the best, don't ask why. Already did it, Tash. How do you feel, Nathan asks, how do you feel about character in the Harry Potter series using stools to assist them when defecating? Huh? Using stools to assist them? I don't know what you mean by that.
Squatty potty.
Oh, squatty potty. Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. I'm so happy with that they're doing that in that universe too, because I do it. Squatty potties are the bomb. Get that poop out, you know? What is cooler, Boggarts or Grindylows? Oh, cooler. I don't know much about Grindylows. So right now, Boggarts are cooler. Grindylows right now are just weed smoking little monsters. Who's got this? No, I'm not going to read that. Are you going to read The Cursed Child? Yeah, I'm going to read them all for sure. I'm at a point right now where I want to read them during the day. I'm like itching to read them, but I can't because I'm waiting for this. So, yeah, it's interesting. What other questions we got here? We're gonna read The Cursed Child, get that poop out, you know? Yeah. What is your favorite character? That's from Davis and Alyssa. I loved doing Lockhart. That was so much fun. But Hagrid's my favorite. Just from character, Lupin's. I'm not discovering. I don't know much about him yet, other than he's very friendly and kind. He might turn into my favorite, but I love Hagrid and I love Dumbledore. To actually do the voices of is for sure Trelawney, Lockhart, and that stupid knight. What's his name? Cadogan? Oh man, he's so much fun. You should go see The Cursed Child before you read the play. Oh yeah, that play. Nuh-uh. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it before I see it. I don't want to ruin it. Peeves is pretty fun. He's a pretty fun character. He pops he's more like a red cherry, like a cherry on top. He's not my favorite. What's my secret? What's my secret about what? Just in general? My secret is annoying people. That's my secret. Do not get me started on Cursed Child. I will not, because I don't want to know about it yet. So there you go. All right, got about minute 40 left. A couple of things at the end. Go follow Mark at yoc.creations for some cool artsy things. He does a variety of different things, not just one thing. Go follow Dexter just in real life. Go find him and follow him. Cave Cannon Productions is the company I'm a part of. Go follow us for fun things we do. How do you decide what shirt to wear each time? Whatever I feel. Just grab something. Grab whatever I think, what I'm feeling like. This one's kind of a funky one. It's a weird one. Very weird. Okay. Please applaud your nurses at 7 o'clock. Coming up in a minute here. Applaud them. Thank you so much for what you do. And I'll be back tomorrow at 6 o'clock for Conk's Corner with John Weasley. And, I forgot to call you my conquistadors. There's 2 more questions. What are these? What did you dress up as? Will you dress up as Hagrid for Halloween this year? Maybe. That'd be a fun one. Which other question quickly before we end? Oh, I don't even know anymore. Okay. Thanks everybody for listening. I'll be back tomorrow at 6 o'clock for some more of this. It's getting to really good times, really good, interesting, intense, thrillery kind of parts here. So I'm excited for it. Okay. I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.